Helena's old Volvo crunched over the gravel drive, finally coming to a halt before the imposing silhouette of the house. Twilight was bleeding into night, casting long skeletal shadows from the surrounding pines. The air hung heavy with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, a fragrance both earthy and faintly unsettling. Helena stepped out of the car, stretching her stiff limbs, a knot of apprehension tightening in her stomach. She had driven for hours, escaping the city's suffocating embrace, seeking solace and inspiration in this remote woodland retreat. The house stood 3 stories tall, its grey clapboard siding weathered and faded. Dark windows stared out like vacant eyes, reflecting the last vestiges of the dying light. A wide porch wrapped around the front, its wooden planks warped and groaning underfoot as Helena hauled her suitcase towards the heavy oak door. The key, cold and ornate, turned with a grating click. Pushing the door open, she was met with a wave of stale, musty air. Dust motes danced in the faint light filtering through the doorway. The interior was shrouded in shadows, the furniture draped in white sheets like ghostly figures. A grand staircase curved upwards into the darkness of the second floor. Despite the chill, a strange warmth seemed to emanate from the house, a subtle undercurrent that prickled the hairs on the back of her neck. She dismissed it as fatigue, the product of the long drive and her own overactive imagination. Yet, as she stepped further inside, a distinct feeling settled upon her. She was not alone. The heavy oak door creaked shut behind her, plunging the entryway into near darkness. Helena fumbled for the light switch, finally finding it by the doorframe. A dim yellow light flickered to life, illuminating the dust-filled space. She dragged her suitcase into the living room, pulling off the sheet covering a large floral sofa. The fabric felt cold and slightly damp to the touch. Exhaustion tugged at her, but she decided to unpack a few essentials before turning in. Later, tucked beneath the musty-smelling blankets of the guest bedroom's antique 4-poster bed, Helena found sleep elusive. The silence of the forest, so profound compared to the city's constant hum, was almost deafening. Every creak of the old house, every rustle of leaves outside the window, seemed amplified in the stillness. She tossed and turned, her mind replaying the day's events. Then, the dreams began. They were vivid and fragmented, a jumble of unsettling images. A woman's face, contorted in fear, the blurred shapes of children playing, a flash of something sharp and metallic. Woven through these images were whispers, faint and indistinct, like voices carried on the wind. They seemed to call her name, a soft, sibilant, Helena. Helena. She awoke with a start, her heart pounding in her chest. The room was dark, the only light coming from the sliver of moon visible through the window. As she lay there, trying to calm her racing pulse, she heard it again, a faint whisper, seemingly emanating from the wall beside her bed. It was too quiet to be the wind, too close to be anything outside. She sat up, straining her ears. There it was again, a barely audible murmur, like someone speaking just beyond the plaster. A shiver ran down her spine. She told herself it was her imagination, the lingering remnants of her disturbing dreams. But as she lay back down, pulling the covers tighter around her, she couldn't shake the feeling that the whispers were real, that they were coming from within the very walls of the house. A small, cold seed of fear began to take root in her mind. The following morning, the unsettling feeling from the night before lingered. Helena moved through the house with a sense of unease, every creak and groan of the old structure amplifying her apprehension. She made a pot of strong coffee, hoping the caffeine would clear her head and dispel the lingering fog of her dreams. The whispers, thankfully, had ceased with the dawn, but the memory of them remained, a chilling echo in the silence of the house. Determined to distract herself, Helena decided to explore the nearby town. A small weathered sign pointed towards Ashwood, a few miles down the winding forest road. The town, when she arrived, was little more than a cluster of quaint shops. and a small library clustered around a central square. The library, a brick building with ivy climbing its walls, seemed like a good place to start. Inside, the air smelled of old paper and dust. Helena approached the librarian, a kind-faced woman with spectacles perched on her nose. She explained that she was staying at the old house on the edge of the woods and was curious about its history. The librarian's expression shifted slightly, a flicker of something unreadable passing across her face. She led Helena to a section of local history archives. Pulling down a thick-bound volume, the librarian pointed to a faded photograph of the house. "The Blackwood Manor," she said, her voice hushed. "A tragic place." Helena's heart quickened. Flipping through the brittle pages, she found newspaper clippings detailing a horrific event, the brutal murder of the Blackwood family, a mother and her 2 young children, within the house's walls. The articles described the scene in gruesome detail, the unsolved mystery of the perpetrator haunting the community for decades. As Helena read, a chill ran down her spine. The details in the articles, the layout of the house, the descriptions of the victims, eerily matched the fragmented images from her dreams. One article in particular described the mother, Helena Blackwood, as a woman with long dark hair and piercing blue eyes. The image resonated deeply with Helena, a sense of recognition stirring within her. The date of the murders, printed in bold at the top of the page, sent a shiver through her. October 27th, almost exactly 80 years ago. The whispers, the dreams, the unsettling feeling of being watched, it all suddenly clicked into place. The house wasn't just old, it was haunted. Back at the house, the atmosphere had shifted. The lingering unease had solidified into a palpable sense of dread. Helena moved through the rooms with a newfound caution, her eyes scanning the shadows, her ears straining for any sound. The newspaper clippings lay spread out on the living room table, the faded photographs of the Blackwood family staring up at her. Eleanor's face in particular held her gaze, a silent plea etched in her features. That night, the whispers returned, but they were no longer indistinct murmurs. They were clearer, more insistent, forming words, fragments of sentences. "Help us. Find him. He's still here." They seemed to emanate from the walls, the floorboards, the very air itself. Helena lay in bed, paralyzed with fear, listening to the disembodied voices echoing through the house. The next day, driven by a mixture of terror and a strange sense of obligation, Helena began her own investigation. She started in the attic, a dusty, cobweb-filled space that smelled of dry rot and forgotten things. Sunlight streamed through cracks in the boarded-up windows, illuminating swirling dust motes. She sifted through old boxes, finding discarded furniture, moth-eaten clothes, and yellowed letters. In one corner, tucked beneath a pile of old newspapers, she found a small wooden doll, its painted face chipped and faded. It was a simple toy, but it sent a shiver down her spine. It felt cold. As she held the doll, a vision flashed through her mind, a young girl clutching the same doll, hiding in a dark corner, her eyes wide with terror. The vision was so vivid, so real, that Helena gasped, dropping the doll as if it had burned her. She realized the whispers weren't just random noises. They were pleas for help, echoes of the past reaching out to her from beyond the grave. She felt a growing connection to the Blackwood family, especially to Helena, whose presence seemed to permeate the house. She felt compelled to uncover the truth, to bring justice to those who had been so cruelly wronged. The house wasn't just haunted, it was a crime scene, and she was determined to solve the mystery. The doll, lying on the dusty attic floor, seemed to pulse with a faint residual energy. Helena cautiously picked it up again, turning it over in her hands. As she did, another vision flooded her mind, clearer and more complete than the last. She saw the little girl clutching the doll, hiding in a closet downstairs. Then, the door opened, and a shadowy figure loomed over her. The vision ended abruptly, leaving Helena breathless and shaken. She began spending more time in the house, retracing the steps of the Blackwood family, trying to piece together the events of that fateful night. She studied the layout of the house, comparing it to the descriptions in the newspaper articles and the fragments of her visions. She felt Eleanor's presence most strongly in the living room near the fireplace. One evening, as a fierce storm raged outside, mirroring the turmoil within her, Helena sat by the fire, staring into the flickering flames. Suddenly, the room grew cold, and the whispers intensified, swirling around her like a vortex. He was one of us. He betrayed us. Then, a vision, sharp and terrifying, unfolded before her eyes. She saw the entire scene. The family gathered in the living room, a tense argument escalating into violence. She saw the killer's face, contorted with rage. It was a man she hadn't expected, a relative driven by greed and resentment. The vision showed him silencing each member of the family one by one, the details brutal and heartbreaking. As the vision faded, Helena stumbled back, her heart pounding in her chest. The truth was horrifying, far more twisted than she could have imagined. But there was something else, a fragmented memory that surfaced from the depths of her own mind. A memory of being a child, visiting the Blackwood Manor with her parents. She remembered playing with the Blackwood children, laughing and running through the house. She remembered seeing the killer, the same man from her vision, arguing with Helena. And then, a flash of something else. A small, terrified child hiding behind a curtain, witnessing a part of the horror, a detail she had buried deep within her subconscious for years. It was her. She had been there, a silent witness to a piece of the tragedy. The guilt she had carried for so long, the undefined weight on her soul, suddenly made sense. It wasn't a random feeling. It was the echo of a repressed trauma, the burden of a memory she had tried to forget. The revelation hit Helena like a physical blow. The fragmented memories, the unsettling dreams, the whispers, they all converged into a single horrifying truth. She had been a witness, a child too young to understand the full extent of the horror she had seen, but the memory had remained buried within her, a source of unconscious guilt and unease. Now the truth was out, and with it came a sense of both terror and liberation. As the storm outside raged on, mirroring the storm within her, Helena felt a shift in the atmosphere of the house. The oppressive presence, the feeling of being watched, began to dissipate. The whispers, once frantic and pleading, softened, becoming gentle murmurs of gratitude. She felt Eleanor's presence near her, no longer a tormented spirit seeking justice, but a peaceful presence, finally at rest. Helena walked through the house, revisiting the places she had seen in her visions. In the living room, by the fireplace, she paused, picturing the scene of the crime. She imagined Eleanor and her children, their lives tragically cut short. She spoke aloud, her voice trembling but firm. "I know what happened," she said. "I know who did it. You're safe now. You can rest." As she spoke, a faint light flickered in the room, a soft, ethereal glow that seemed to emanate from the very walls. It was a fleeting moment, but Helena saw it clearly. The faces of Eleanor and her children smiling, their eyes filled with peace. Then the light faded, and the room returned to its normal state. The storm outside began to subside, the wind dying down to a gentle whisper. The house was silent, finally at peace. The intense cold that had permeated the house for days was gone, replaced by a sense of warmth. Helena knew, with a certainty that settled deep within her bones, that the Blackwood family had found their rest. Their story, their tragedy, had finally been heard. The following morning, the sun streamed through the windows, casting long rays of light across the dust-covered furniture. The house felt different, lighter, as if a heavy burden had been lifted. Helena moved through the rooms with a sense of calm she hadn't felt since arriving. The air was fresh, the silence no longer oppressive but peaceful. The echoes of the past had finally silenced. Helena spent the next few days organizing her notes, piecing together the full story of the Blackwood family. She began to write, the words flowing freely, no longer blocked by the weight of her own buried trauma. She wrote about Helena, about her children, about the tragedy that had befallen them. She wrote about the killer, his motives, his betrayal, and she wrote about her own experience, her connection to the house, her journey to uncover the truth. When the time came to leave, Helena felt a pang of sadness, but it was a bittersweet feeling, tinged with a sense of closure. She locked the heavy oak door one last time, leaving the key on the porch. As she drove away, she glanced back at the house, nestled among the trees. It no longer looked imposing or menacing, but rather peaceful, almost serene. Helena's book, The Echo of Blackwood Manor, became a success. It told the story of the Blackwood family, bringing their tragedy to light and finally giving them the justice they deserved. But it was also Helena's story, a story of confronting the past, of finding healing and inspiration in the most unexpected of places. She had come to the forest seeking solace from her own demons, and in confronting the ghosts of Blackwood Manor, she had finally laid her own to rest. The echo of the past had silenced, replaced by the quiet strength of her own voice.